This is the tailored placket sample that we're going to be doing. It's usually in a sleeve down at the cuff, but it can also be at a neckline. This is what it looks like finished. There's a slit in the fabric, but it's all enclosed with this placket, so there are no raw edges. The pattern pieces that you will need are the big rectangle one. It says tailored placket sleeve. And then you also need a tailored placket pattern. We've gone ahead and created a right sleeve placket and a left sleeve placket. For our sample, we will be doing the right sleeve placket. I've actually shortened it. A men's placket is usually 2 inches longer than a woman's, so you could have cut it on the men's or the women's. So here's what it looks like cut. We need to transfer some markings. This is our stitch box. So I have already transferred that marking to the wrong side. There was a marking on the sleeve piece. And once again, that's the stitch box. So transfer that marking to the wrong side. We need to do some pressing. You can either use your seam gauge, or I'm going to show you how you can actually mark by snipping. So we'll go ahead and put the placket right side up, and then put the pattern on top. And I'm going to go ahead and just snip the bottom of the areas where we want to fold under. So there's a snip there, snip here. That's a fold line, fold line. These are stitching lines. I've already marked those, so I don't need that. But I'm going to snip here. Then I'll turn it around and I'll do the same thing up here. This is called the tower. So I'll snip at the top here, snip at the top of the tower here, and here. That will make it a little easier to start folding it under. We'll go ahead and fold under the non-tower side. So I've got the placket wrong side up. I'm going to turn it under 1/4 inch right there, matching up my little snips. And then on the tower side, we'll turn under that raw edge 1/4 inch. Up there to my snip. And then there's another one right here. So we'll fold that in the 1/4 inch up at the top of the tower. And then find the little snip at the bottom. There it is. So that is nice and even. You want your placket to be even width. And so accuracy is really important. And if you think you need to check it, just make sure that your width's the same from top to bottom. Okay, now we're going to create the little point here. So we've got this folded, it's wrong side up. We're going to fold down our tower diagonally so that raw edge meets fold. It's a 45-degree angle, and press. And then we're going to fold it in halfway the other side, matching folds. And that will give you a perfect point right in the center. You can trim out some of that bulk if you want to, but we're going to go ahead and leave it in there. We'll just make sure that when we stitch it down that we've tucked under any raw edges. Okay, we are ready to get this set up. You'll take your fake sleeve here, wrong side up. Here's your stitch box, and we're going to line up the placket wrong side up as well. So we have wrong side of sleeve to right side of placket, and I could put a pin through the corner just to match that up. I could have made little snip marks down here at the bottom to match that up. Just do your best to match stitch box on top of stitch box. That looks good. So go ahead and just put a couple of pins there to hold it in place. Now we're going to stitch around here, and then after that we're going to be clipping up into the corner. So we want a very strengthened stitch here. So we're going to shorten our stitch length to 1.5. So we're ready to take it to the machine now. I've shortened my stitch length to 1.5. You want to stay very straight on this so our stitch box is even. You could do a couple of back stitches, but you don't need to do much because the stitch length is so short. Just take your time. I'm going to put my needle in the down position so it'll be easier for me to pivot. I'm going to stick a pin there so I know when I'm getting close and I can see it. So I'm going to raise the presser foot, see if I'm there yet. Yes, that's good. Okay, needle down, raise the presser foot, pivot. Go ahead and another little mark there to just help guide me. Looks like I can go one more or not. I think we're good. So we're going to pivot, and now we're ready to finish it. And just a little back stitch to anchor it. And we'll cut our thread tails. We're going to take it back to the ironing board to cut it and to press it. As you saw on the pattern, this is our cutting line, and about 3/8 from the top of the stitch box, we're going to go diagonally into each corner. Can be a little scary, but we've shortened our stitch length. We'll just make sure that we stop cutting right at the corner, because we need to go right to our stitching but not through. Okay, needs to be able to hinge like that. It's really nice to have these smaller scissors to get up in that corner. Okay, now that that is cut, we are ready to press our placket away from the sleeve. We'll start here on the smaller side. Just press the placket away from the sleeve to help open that up. And now we'll do the tower side. And then it's really important to press the top of the stitch box. Open that up. After we've done that, we are ready now to turn the placket to the right side. So turn your sleeve right side up and bring your placket through. Okay, we'll save the tower for last. So we're going to do the shorter side. You're going to take your folded piece and wrap it around your cut raw edge here, just barely one thread beyond where your stitching was. Pin that in place. It's very important that the top of the stitch box is up. See how that wants to flip down? You want to make sure that stays up. And so you could either press that again or take your thumbnail and just finger press it. You want that up. That will enclose the raw edges. So I'm going to go ahead and put a pin through there to make sure that it does stay up. Okay, now we're going to take it to the machine and edge stitch right along this folded edge, all the way up to the top. Position your fabric underneath the presser foot with the fold of the fabric in this right corner of the right toe. And then decide, and change your stitch length back to 2.5. Decide where you want your needle. I want to edge stitch a little closer, so I moved my needle one to the right. I'm going to go ahead and stitch on to my fabric, do a little back stitch. You could do an anchor stitch, then take your time to be really accurate with this edge stitching. Keep things smooth. Notice I've pinned through here to keep that fabric up above the stitch box. Just do a little anchor stitch and oops. Then take that out and cut your thread tails. The top and at the bottom. There, nice and even on our edge stitching. Now we're going to take it back to the ironing board so we can press and pin the other side. The tower part is always last. We're double checking that our fabric above the stitch box is up. Remember, we have pressed the seam allowance towards the tower, and now we're going to wrap the tower around that raw edge. Just like we did for the underlap, this fold just barely overlaps the stitching by maybe one thread. I'm going to now press that before I pin it. I've already pressed it before as we were prepping it, but it's not laying as flat as I want it to. I've kind of lost my little triangle here, so we'll find that again. Fold that under again. You'll notice that it's completely enclosing all the raw edges. This is your quality control check to make sure the width of your placket is even all the way up and that the point is in the very center. We'll go ahead and pin the folded edge now. We could do a couple of markings on here. The top of the tower needs to be stitched down, and we can do two different styles. You'll notice this style has just a box, but there's another method you can do as well. So I'll show you that one. It's kind of hard to see the stitching, but you can see the box with an X through it. As I get back to my sample, I notice that the square corners are not even, and so I need to fix that. So I'm going to unpin this, and we're going to back up a little bit and see what happened to make that uneven, because they should have been the same. So we're going to start again. Yeah, my pressing line came out and I pressed it on a different spot. So we're going to do that again, because this is usually foolproof if you fold it exactly in half there. There, that looks better. That looks much better. We're ready to pin down the tower part. You're just pinning through the tower part in your sleeve. Remember, the fold of this placket just barely covers your stitching line. Now, there's an important part to mark. We need to have a horizontal stitch barely above where our stitch box is. So you need to feel where that stitch box is. And I'm going to stick a pin exactly where that stitch box is. And now I'm going to draw two perpendicular lines to the placket, so we'll know exactly where we're going to stitch horizontally. We're going to come from point to point here, So I'll draw a little white line. Hopefully you can see that. And then just barely above where the pin marking is, I'm going to do my other perpendicular line. You want to make sure that you stitch horizontally across the stitching box, and I'll show you why. We want to lock in those raw edges so that none of the fabric at the top of the stitch box can flip down. So that's why we're doing one right above there. We're stitching directionally in the same direction that we did our underlap. We went from the bottom to the top. We come up to this point, pivot to this point, pivot to this point, then we come straight down, pivot, we stitch straight across the horizontal, and here's where we're going to pivot and go diagonally over to our side corner. Then we're going to stitch horizontally across here, and then we're going to go down diagonally to this opposite corner. Then we'll leave our thread tails on and pull our threads to the back. Okay, we're ready to take it to the machine. You need to make sure that the underlap is out of the way when we stitch up to this point, and then you can have them overlapped for the rest of the way. We just don't want to get that caught as we start our stitching here. Now I need to change my needle position because I'm going to be on the left toe inside corner. So I'm going to position my presser foot, and I'll have my needle up so I can move it one to the left and check that. That looks good. Now I got to make sure that underlap is out of the way. You could do a couple of anchor stitches or back stitching. Take your time as you're edge stitching. You want it to look perfect. I'm getting that underlap back in place. Keep stitching. Almost ready to pivot, so you want to slow down and see where you are. See how many more stitches. I think I'm good with that one, so I'm going to stop. Take that pin out and rotate or pivot. Continue to the top point. Looks like I can do one more. Okay, we pivot again. Okay, I think we're good there. So now we're going to come straight down to our bottom horizontal line, which is just above the stitch box. You're going through all layers now, including the underlap. It's hard for me to see my line, so I'm going to just put a pin there to help guide me so I know when to turn. There we go. Okay. Now we're doing our horizontal stitching all the way across to meet our first edge stitching. Good. Now we're pivoting to come diagonally to the opposite corner. You could have drawn a line if you felt that that was important. Help you be accurate. Remember, our needle is one to the left, so we can't use this center marking as our guide. Okay, that corner. Now we're going to pivot and come to our other horizontal part of the box. Okay, pivot, and now we're ready for our final diagonal line. We'll come to this corner. One more stitch. Good. Okay, we are going to leave a longer thread tail, and we'll bring it over to the ironing board so we can pull our threads to the back. Sometimes your back stitching wouldn't show, but obviously it's going to show on this because I'm using a contrast thread. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it to the wrong side, and I'm going to pull on the bobbin thread to make the needle thread loop to the back. This will look much cleaner. Something happened to that thread. Doesn't want to come to the back. There we go. Okay, and then you'll tie a square knot. And then you can cut your thread tails short. Turn it back over, and there's our finished placket. I'm going to just show you one more time how I stitched just above the top of the stitch box, okay? I could have even gotten a little bit closer, but that is just fine. That's caught those raw edges, and they are now enclosed.